In that place between wakefulness and dreams, I found myself in the room. There were no distinguishing features except the one wall covered with a small index of card files. They were like the ones in libraries that list titles by author or subject in alphabetical order. But these files, which stretched from floor to ceiling and seemingly endless in either direction, had a very different headings. As I drew near the wall of files, the first to catch my attention was one which read, "Girls I Have Liked." I opened it and began flipping through the cards. I quickly shut it, shocked to realize that I had recognized the names written on each one. And then, without being told, I knew exactly where I was. This lifeless room with its small files was a crude catalogue system of my life. Here were written the actions of every moment, big and small, in a detail my memory couldn't catch. A sense of wonder and curiosity coupled with horror stirred within me as I began randomly opening the files and exploring their content. Some brought joy and sweet memories, others a sense of shame and regret. So intense that I would look over my shoulder to see if anyone was watching. A file named Friends was next, one marked, "Friends I Have Betrayed." The titles ranged from the mundane to the outright weird. Books I have read, lies I have told, comfort I have given, jokes I have laughed at. Some were almost hilarious in their exactness. Things I yelled at my brothers, others I couldn't laugh at. Things I've done in anger, things I've muttered under my breath at my parents. I never ceased to be surprised by the content. Often there were many more cards, many more than I had expected, sometimes fewer than I hoped. I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the life I had lived. Could it be possible that I had the time in my 20 years to write each of these thousands or even millions of cards? But each card confirmed this truth. Each was written in my own handwriting, each signed with my signature. When I pulled out the file marked "Songs I Have Listened to," I realized the files grew to contain their contents. The cards were packed tightly, and yet after 2 or 3 yards, I hadn't found the end of the file. I shut it, shamed not so much by the quality of music, but more by the vast amount of time I knew that file represented. When I came to a file marked "Lustful Thoughts," I felt a chill run down my body. I pulled the file out only an inch, not willing to test its size, and drew out a card. I shuddered at its detailed content. I felt sick to think that such a moment had been recorded. An almost animal rage broke over me. One thought dominated my mind: no one must ever see these cards. Ever. No one must ever see this room. I have to destroy them. In an insane frenzy, I yanked the file out. Its size didn't matter. Now I had to empty it and burn the cards. But as I took it at one end and began pouring it on the floor, I could not dislodge a single card. I became desperate and pulled out a card, only to find it as strong as steel when I tried to tear it. Defeated and utterly helpless, I returned the file to its slot, leaning my forehead against the wall. I let a long, self-pitying sigh, and then I saw it. The title bore "People I Have Shared the Gospel With." The handle was brighter than those around it. newer than the unused. I pulled on its handle a small box, not more than 3 inches long, into my hands. I could count the cards it contained on one hand. And then the tears came. I began to weep, sobs so deep that the hurt in my stomach shook right through me. I fell on my knees and cried. I cried out of shame, overwhelming shame of it all. The rows of files, the shelves swirled in my tear-filled eyes. No one must ever know of this room. I must lock it up and hide the key. But then as I pushed away the tears, I saw him. No, please, not him. Not here. Oh, anyone but Jesus. I watched helplessly as he began to open the files and read the cards. I couldn't bring myself to look into his face. I saw a sorrow deeper than my own. He seemed to intuitively go to the worst boxes. Why did he have to read every one? Finally, he turned and looked at me across the room. He looked at me with pity in his eyes. But this was a pity that didn't anger me. I dropped my head, covered my face with my hands, and began to cry again. He walked over and put his arm around me. He could have said many things, but he didn't say a word. He just cried with me. Then he got up and walked back to the wall of files. Starting at one end of the room, he took out a file and one by one, he began to sign his name over mine on each card. No, I shouted, rushing to him. All I could find to say was no, no, as I pulled the card from him. His name shouldn't be on these cards, but there it was, written in red, so rich, so dark, so alive. The name of Jesus covered mine. It was written with his blood. He gently took the card back, smiled a sad smile, and began to sign the cards. I don't think I've ever understood how he did it so quickly. But in the next instant, it seemed I heard him close the last file and walk back to my side. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "It is finished." I stood up and he led me out of the room. There was no lock on its door. There are still cards to be written.